The morning sun streamed through the airport's massive glass windows as Thomas Chen checked his watch one more time. He had exactly 57 minutes until his flight to Chicago, where he was set to close the biggest deal of his career, a partnership that would take his tech company from successful to industry-leading. As CEO of Skyward Innovation, Thomas had traveled enough to have his airport routine down to a science. Dressed in his weekend clothes, dark jeans, a plain navy sweater, and comfortable sneakers, he looked more like someone heading to a casual lunch than a powerful executive worth millions. He preferred it that way, especially on Sundays. The suit and tie would come out tomorrow for the meetings. Thomas pulled his carry-on behind him, his laptop bag slung over his shoulder as he approached the priority check-in desk. The lines for regular check-in stretched across the terminal, but the first-class lane stood empty except for an older white couple being helped by one of the agents. "Next, please," called the second agent. A woman with tight blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her name tag read, Patricia. Thomas stepped forward with a polite smile. "Good morning." Patricia's eyes flicked over him, lingering on his casual clothes before returning to her computer screen without acknowledging his greeting. "Ticket and ID," she said flatly. Thomas slid his digital boarding pass and driver's license across the counter. "I'm on the 10:45 to Chicago. First class." Patricia took his ID and glanced at the boarding pass on his phone with what looked like skepticism. She typed something into her computer, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Is there a problem?" Thomas asked, keeping his voice even. "One moment, sir." The way she said sir carried none of the respect the word was supposed to convey. She picked up her phone and dialed an extension, turning slightly away as if Thomas wasn't meant to hear. "I need a verification at counter 6, she said quietly. Thomas had been through this before. Not often, but enough times that he recognized the pattern. He took a deep breath and remained silent, watching as another agent helped a white businessman in casual clothes check in for first class without any additional verification. After what felt like an unnecessarily long wait, Patricia turned back to him. "It seems there's an issue with your reservation." "What kind of issue?" Thomas asked. "I booked this flight 3 weeks ago. The system is showing that first class is overbooked." Patricia's eyes never quite met his. "We can put you on the next flight in 4 hours. Thomas pulled out his phone and opened his Airline app. "That's interesting," he said calmly, "because according to the app there are still 3 first-class seats available on this flight." Patricia's face tightened. "The app isn't always up to date." "I see." Thomas nodded slowly. "And what about my platinum status? Doesn't that protect my reservation?" "Sir, I'm just telling you what the system shows me." Her tone had an edge to it now. "You can either take the later flight or fly coach on this one." Thomas looked around the check-in area. A well-dressed white woman had just approached the first-class line and was being checked in by the other agent. No verification call. No mention of overbooking. "I'd like to speak to your supervisor," Thomas said firmly. Patricia's lips thinned even more. "He's very busy this morning." "I'm happy to wait," Thomas replied. With obvious reluctance, Patricia picked up the phone again. Within minutes, a balding man with a red tie approached the counter. His name tag identified him as Greg Reynolds, customer service supervisor. "What seems to be the problem here?" Greg asked, looking at Patricia rather than Thomas. "This gentleman's first-class reservation is showing as invalid in our system," Patricia explained. "I've offered him alternative options." Thomas extended his hand. "Thomas Chen, CEO of Skyward Innovation. There seems to be some confusion about my first-class ticket, which I purchased weeks ago and confirmed yesterday." Greg shook his hand without enthusiasm. "Mr. Chen, sometimes our system overbooks first class. It's unfortunate, but I understand how airline booking systems work," Thomas cut in smoothly. "What I don't understand is why the passengers behind me are being checked into first class without issue, while I'm being told it's overbooked." Greg's face flushed slightly. "Every reservation is different, sir." "How exactly?" Thomas pressed. "Is it the time of booking? The fare class? Or perhaps something else?" A small crowd of travelers had begun to notice the exchange. Thomas could feel their eyes on him, some curious, some uncomfortable, some knowing exactly what was happening. "Sir, I don't appreciate what you're implying," Greg said, lowering his voice. "We treat all our passengers equally." "Then please treat me equally by checking me in for the flight I paid for." Thomas replied, maintaining his composure despite the anger building inside him. Greg leaned closer, dropping his voice to just above a whisper. Look, if you continue to make a scene, I'll have to call security. Thomas felt a familiar weight settle in his chest, the same weight he'd carried since childhood, through college, through his rise in the business world. The weight of having to prove he belonged in spaces others entered without question, without a word. He pulled out his phone and started recording. For the record, he said clearly, I have a confirmed first-class reservation on Flight 802 to Chicago. I have platinum status with this airline. I've been told my reservation can't be honored due to overbooking, yet other first-class passengers continue to be checked in without issue. Could you please explain the specific reason my reservation is being singled out? Greg's face hardened. Put that phone away. Recording isn't allowed in the terminal. Actually, Thomas replied calmly, according to the airport's public policy, recording is permitted in public areas as long as it doesn't interfere with security procedures. I've just checked. A few passengers had stopped to watch now. One woman had her own phone out, recording the interaction from a distance. May I please see your employee identification numbers? Thomas asked politely. And a written copy of the policy you're using to deny me boarding? Greg's face had turned from pink to red. This is ridiculous. We're just following protocol. Which protocol specifically? Thomas asked. I'd like to review it. Sir, step aside or I will call security, Greg said, his voice rising slightly. Thomas didn't move. Please do. I'd appreciate having them here to witness this conversation. The tension at the counter was thick enough to cut with a knife. Thomas could feel his heart pounding, but his face remained calm. This wasn't his first unfair fight, and he knew better than to let his emotions show. That was exactly what they wanted, an angry outburst they could use to justify their treatment of him. Instead, Thomas lowered his phone and took a step back. I'm going to make a call, he said quietly. When I return, I hope we can resolve this professionally. He walked several paces away toward the huge windows overlooking the runway. The morning sun glinted off the planes taxiing on the tarmac as Thomas scrolled through his contacts. He stopped at a name and pressed the call button. Diane, he said when the call connected. I'm sorry to bother you on a Sunday morning. Thomas. Not a bother at all, came the warm voice of Diane Powell, who served on both the board of Skyward Innovation and the corporate board of National Airways, the parent company of the airline Thomas was attempting to fly. I'm having an unusual situation at the airport, Thomas explained, keeping his voice steady as he described the check-in experience without embellishment. Which terminal are you in? Diane asked, her voice now crisp and professional. Terminal B, first-class check-in counter. Stay right there. Don't let them pressure you into accepting a different flight. Thomas ended the call and returned to the check-in area, where Greg and Patricia were huddled in conversation, occasionally glancing his way. My boarding pass. Please, Thomas said when he approached the counter again. Sir, as we explained, Patricia began, is there a problem here? A new voice entered the conversation. All heads turned to see a tall black woman in a sharp suit striding toward them. The airline's executive pin gleamed on her lapel. I'm Vivian Taylor, Regional Director of Customer Experience, she said, her voice carrying an authority that made both Patricia and Greg stand straighter. Mr. Chen, I understand there's been some confusion with your reservation. Ms. Taylor, Thomas said, recognizing her from industry events. Yes, there seems to be. Vivian turned to Greg. Pull up Mr. Chen's reservation, please. Greg hurriedly typed on the computer. It's showing as confirmed, he said, his voice suddenly uncertain. Then please issue his boarding pass immediately, Vivian said. She turned to Thomas with a genuinely apologetic expression. Mr. Chen, on behalf of the airline, I sincerely apologize for this misunderstanding. If you'll allow me, I'd like to escort you to the lounge where you can relax before boarding. Thomas could feel the stares of everyone around them. The other passengers, the airport staff, the people who had stopped to watch the drama unfold. He noticed the woman who had been recording had lowered her phone but was now typing rapidly on it. As Vivian led him away from the counter, Thomas caught a glimpse of Greg and Patricia's faces, shock mixed with the dawning realization of exactly who they had tried to turn away and what it might mean for them. The weight in Thomas's chest hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted. This time, the system that so often worked against him had been forced to correct itself. But he couldn't help wondering about all the other travelers who didn't have a board member's number in their contacts, who had no choice but to accept being bumped, questioned, or humiliated. This wasn't over, Thomas decided as they walked toward the exclusive lounge. In fact, it was just beginning. The first-class lounge was a stark contrast to the tense scene at the check-in counter. Soft lighting, plush chairs, and the gentle hum of quiet conversations created an atmosphere of exclusivity and calm. Thomas followed Vivian through the sliding glass doors, nodding politely to the attendant who scanned the temporary pass Vivian had provided. "Please, have a seat," Vivian gestured toward a private corner booth. "Can I get you anything? Coffee? Something stronger, perhaps?" Thomas checked his watch. "Just water, thank you. I don't drink before meetings, even if they're still a few hours away." Vivian motioned to a nearby attendant before sliding into the seat across from him. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped lightly on the table, the only sign of her nervousness. "Mr. Chen, I want to personally apologize for what happened out there," she began, her voice low and sincere. "It was unacceptable, and I assure you it does not reflect our company values." Thomas took a moment before responding. He'd heard similar apologies before, carefully worded statements that acknowledged the incident without admitting the real problem. "Ms. Taylor," he said finally, "I appreciate you stepping in, but we both know what happened out there wasn't a misunderstanding. It was profiling, plain and simple." Vivian didn't flinch or rush to deny it, which Thomas found refreshing. The attendant arrived with water for both of them, and she waited until he left before continuing. "You're right," she admitted, "and as someone who's experienced similar treatment myself, I'm especially troubled that it happened on my watch in my region." Thomas took a sip of water. "How did you know what was happening? Did Diane call you?" "She did. She also mentioned who you are." Vivian's expression became more businesslike. "Beyond the obvious problems with how you were treated, I should note that Skyward Innovation is one of our biggest corporate clients in the tech sector. Your company books over $2 million in flights with us annually. Interesting that you know that figure off the top of your head," Thomas remarked. "I make it my business to know our key accounts," Vivian replied, "which makes what happened even more inexcusable from a purely business perspective." Thomas leaned forward. "I don't want special treatment because my company spends money with your airline. I want equal treatment because I'm a human being who purchased a ticket." Vivian nodded slowly. "Of course. I didn't mean to imply otherwise. What happens now?" Thomas asked. "To the staff involved?" "There will be an investigation," Vivian said. "I've already begun the process. Both employees will be interviewed along with witnesses. We have camera footage as well. And the woman who was recording on her phone." Vivian's expression tightened slightly. "Yes, we're aware of that. Our social media team is monitoring the situation." Thomas wasn't surprised. In today's world, incidents like this rarely stayed contained. Someone always had a phone ready, and videos could spread within hours, sometimes minutes. "I'm not interested in public shaming," Thomas said. "I just want accountability and change. May I ask what your expectations are?" Vivian inquired carefully. Thomas considered the question. He'd built his company on solving problems, not just complaining about them. "I expect a formal acknowledgement of what happened and why it was wrong," he began. "Not a generic statement about regrettable incidents or misunderstandings, but an honest admission that racial profiling occurred. I expect appropriate consequences for the staff involved, not necessarily firing them, but certainly retraining. And most importantly, I expect systemic changes to prevent this from happening to anyone else." Vivian was making notes on her tablet. "That's reasonable. I'll take these points to our executive team. One more thing," Thomas added. "I'd like to know exactly what verification Patricia was calling for when I first approached the counter." Vivian's hesitation told Thomas everything he needed to know. "It's an unofficial code some staff use," she admitted reluctantly. "It's against company policy." "A code for what exactly?" Thomas pressed. "For verifying that a passenger matches their ticket class or status level," Vivian said, clearly uncomfortable. "It's discriminatory and completely unacceptable." Thomas nodded, filing this information away. The existence of such a code suggested the problem was more widespread than just 2 employees. "Your flight board's in 30 minutes, Vivian said, changing the subject. "I'll personally escort you to the gate when you're ready." "Thank you, but that won't be necessary," Thomas replied. "I've been finding my own way for a long time." Vivian seemed about to insist but thought better of it. Of course. I understand. As they sat in silence for a moment, Thomas's phone buzzed with an incoming text. It was from his assistant, Raymond. Already seeing something on Twitter about your airport experience. You okay? Need anything? Thomas typed a quick response. I'm fine, handled. We'll call after I board. He looked up to find Vivian watching him with a knowing expression. It's starting, isn't it? She asked. Apparently so, Thomas confirmed. But social media outrage wasn't my goal today. I just wanted to catch my flight like everyone else. For what it's worth, Vivian said, I'm glad it was you this happened to. Thomas raised an eyebrow. I mean, she clarified, I'm not glad it happened at all. But if it had to happen to someone, I'm glad it was someone with the power to demand real change. Most passengers don't have board members on speed dial or corporate accounts worth millions. That's exactly the problem, Thomas said. Justice shouldn't depend on who you know or how much you spend. Before Vivian could respond, Thomas's phone rang. The screen showed Diane Powell, his second call from her that morning. Excuse me, he said, rising from the table. I should take this. He walked to a quiet corner of the lounge. Diane, thank you again for your help. Don't thank me yet, Diane replied, her voice tight. Have you seen social media in the last 15 minutes? I just got a text about something on Twitter. Why? The video is going viral, Diane explained. Someone posted it with the hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack, and it's being picked up everywhere. A reporter from the Business Journal already called me for comment. Thomas closed his eyes briefly. That was fast. It always is these days, Diane said. The company's PR team is scrambling. They want to know if you'll accept a private apology and some sort of compensation package. To keep quiet. You mean, they didn't phrase it that way. But essentially, yes. Thomas watched as across the lounge. Vivian was now on her own phone call, her expression increasingly concerned. Tell them I'm not interested in hush money, Thomas said firmly, but I'm interested in real change. I gave Vivian Taylor my expectations. They can start there. Are you sure? Diane asked. This could get messy. It was already messy. Diane. The only difference is now people are watching. After ending the call, Thomas returned to the table where Vivian was just finishing her own conversation. Our communications department is requesting a meeting with you, she said without preamble. The video has been shared over 10,000 times in the last 20 minutes. 10,000? Thomas was genuinely surprised by the speed. People are angry, Vivian said simply, and they're calling for boycotts. Thomas hadn't anticipated this level of public reaction. His intention had been to address the issue directly with the airline, not to spark a social media firestorm. I need to board soon, he said, glancing at his watch. Of course. Vivian stood. But the CEO would like to speak with you when you land in Chicago. He's already on his way there from headquarters. Thomas nodded. The situation had clearly escalated beyond a simple check-in incident. I'll make time to meet him. As they walked toward the exit of the lounge, Thomas could feel eyes on him, other passengers who had likely seen the video or heard about what happened. Some looked sympathetic, others curious, a few uncomfortable. Your gate is B-22, Vivian said as they paused at the lounge entrance. I've instructed the gate agents to begin boarding a few minutes late to ensure you have no issues. That's not necessary, Thomas began. It's not special treatment, Vivian interrupted gently. It's damage control. For us, not you, Thomas understood. The airline was in crisis management mode now. As he walked through the terminal toward his gate, Thomas noticed people glancing at their phones and then up at him with recognition. The video had clearly spread beyond Twitter. He kept his pace steady and his expression neutral. The same professional mask he'd worn in countless difficult business situations. His phone buzzed again, this time with a news alert from a major network. Video shows alleged racial profiling at Capital City Airport. Airline stock drops in pre-market trading. Thomas stopped walking for a moment. What had begun as a personal confrontation was now affecting stock prices and becoming national news. He hadn't asked for any of this, but perhaps it was necessary. Sometimes systems only changed when forced to by public pressure and financial consequences. As he approached Gate B-22, Thomas steeled himself for whatever might come next. The morning's events had already spiraled beyond his control, but his next steps would be deliberate and purposeful. This wasn't just about one flight or one incident anymore. It was about challenging a pattern that affected countless travelers every day. The gate agent looked up as he approached, recognition and anxiety flashing across her face. "Mr. Chen," she said, "we've been expecting you. We're ready to begin boarding whenever you're ready." Thomas nodded, aware of the eyes of waiting passengers on him. "Thank you," he said. "I'm ready now." The flight to Chicago felt longer than its 2 hours and 15 minutes. Thomas spent most of it staring at his laptop screen, trying to focus on the presentation he would deliver tomorrow, but his mind kept drifting back to what had happened at the airport. His phone, set to airplane mode, still displayed the last notification he'd seen before boarding. The airline's stock had dropped nearly 3% in pre-market trading. By the time he landed, who knew how much further it might fall? The flight attendants treated him with exaggerated courtesy. Word had clearly spread through the crew. The lead attendant, a middle-aged Asian woman, stopped by his seat more often than necessary, ensuring his water glass was never less than half full. "Mr. Chen," she said softly during one such visit, "I just wanted to say, well, we're not all like that. Many of us are fighting for better training and policies." Thomas nodded, appreciating her sincerity. "I know. Thank you." As the plane began its descent into Chicago, Thomas looked out the window at the city skyline emerging through wisps of cloud. He had come here to close a deal that would transform his company. But now he found himself in the middle of a different kind of transformation, one he hadn't planned for. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our final approach into Chicago O'Hare International Airport. Local time is 12:32 p.m. and the temperature is 68 degrees. We should be at the gate in about 20 minutes. Thomas gathered his things, tucking his laptop into his bag and straightening his sweater. He had received a text from Raymond just before boarding, informing him that a car would be waiting to take him directly to his hotel. His meeting with the airline CEO wasn't scheduled until 3 p.m., which gave him time to prepare. When the plane finally reached the gate and the seatbelt sign dinged off, Thomas remained seated, allowing other passengers to deplane first. He noticed several of them glancing at him as they passed, some with expressions of recognition or support. The video had clearly spread far and wide. Finally, Thomas stood and made his way to the front of the aircraft. The captain was standing at the cockpit door, a tall white man with silver hair at his temples. "Mr. Chen," the captain said, extending his hand, "I want to personally apologize for your experience today." Thomas shook his hand. "Thank you, Captain. I've been flying for this airline for 22 years, the captain continued. "What happened to you goes against everything we're supposed to stand for." Thomas nodded, appreciating the man's directness. "I hope the company sees it that way too." As Thomas stepped into the jet bridge, he was surprised to see a small group waiting for him. Not the usual crowd of family members greeting arriving passengers, but people in business attire with concerned expressions. A woman stepped forward. She was in her early 50s with short gray hair and wore a charcoal suit with the airline's executive pin on her lapel. "Mr. Chen? I'm Linda Hoffman, Vice President of Customer Experience for the airline." She offered her hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us today." Thomas shook her hand. "I haven't agreed to anything yet, Ms. Hoffman. I was told your CEO wanted to meet at 3 p.m. Linda's smile tightened slightly. "Yes, of course. We just thought you might appreciate an escort through the terminal. The situation has escalated since you boarded your flight." "Escalated how?" Linda glanced at one of her colleagues, a younger man with a tablet in his hands. He stepped forward and offered the device to Thomas. "Sir, if you'd like to see the current news coverage." Thomas took the tablet and saw a news website, displaying his own face and a professional headshot, likely pulled from his company website, alongside footage from the airport. The headline read, "Tech CEO's Airport Ordeal Sparks National Conversation on Travel Discrimination." Below that was a stock ticker showing the airline's shares down nearly 7%. Thomas handed the tablet back. "I see. Mr. Chen," Linda said, her voice quiet but urgent. "Our CEO is actually waiting for you now if you're willing. We have a private room reserved in the executive lounge." Thomas considered the request. He was tired from the flight and the morning's events, and part of him wanted to stick to the original plan, go to the hotel, gather his thoughts, and meet on his own terms later. But another part recognized the opportunity in the airline's eagerness. All right, he agreed. But I'd like to call my assistant first. Of course, Linda said, visibly relieved. We'll wait right here. Thomas stepped a few paces away and dialed Raymond. Boss, you landed. How was the flight? Fine, Thomas replied. Change of plans. The airline executives are here at the gate. They want to meet now instead of at 3. Wow, they're not wasting any time, Raymond said. Do you want me to reschedule anything? No, just let the hotel know I'll be later than expected. And Raymond, what's happening with that video? Raymond's voice became more serious. It's everywhere, boss. Over 1 million views across platforms. It's the top trending topic on Twitter, and the major news networks have all picked it up. Your name is out there now, Thomas sighed. And our investors? Mixed reactions. Some are concerned about how this might affect tomorrow's deal. Others are impressed by how you handled it. Fitzgerald from the board called twice. I'll call him back after this meeting, Thomas promised. Anything else I should know? Raymond hesitated. The woman who recorded the video has been identified. She's given interviews to 3 news outlets already, and there are reports that the airline is considering suspending the employees involved. Already? Without an investigation? That's the rumor. Seems like they're in damage control mode. Thomas ended the call and rejoined Linda and her team, who had been watching him nervously. Let's go, he said simply. They led him through the terminal, drawing curious glances from travelers who recognized either Thomas from the now viral video or the airline executives from their distinctive pins and badges. No one approached them directly, but Thomas could hear whispers as they passed. The executive lounge was on a different level of the terminal, accessible only by a private elevator that required keycard access. The space was significantly more luxurious than the first-class lounge Thomas had visited earlier, all dark wood, leather, and muted lighting. Waiting in a conference room at the back of the lounge was a man Thomas recognized immediately. Walter Richardson, CEO of the airline for the past 8 years, and a regular fixture in business magazines and TV interviews. Walter stood as they entered, his expression a carefully constructed mask of concern. Mr. Chen, thank you for agreeing to meet on such short notice. I'm Walter Richardson. I know who you are, Thomas replied, shaking the offered hand firmly. Walter gestured to the chair across from him. Please have a seat. Can we get you anything? Something to eat, perhaps? You must be hungry after your flight. I'm fine, thank you, Thomas said, taking the offered seat. Let's get straight to the point. Why did you want to meet? Walter glanced at Linda and the others. Would you give us the room, please? The executives filed out silently, closing the door behind them. Mr. Chen, Walter began once they were alone. First, let me personally apologize for what happened this morning. It was inexcusable, and I want you to know that the employees involved have been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. That was quick, Thomas observed. The plane barely landed. Walter's expression tightened slightly. We take these matters very seriously, especially when they involve a distinguished business leader like yourself. And if I had been a teacher or a retail worker, would you have flown in for that meeting too? The question hung in the air between them. Walter cleared his throat. The truth is, Mr. Chen, we would hope to treat any customer with dignity and respect. But yes, the fact that you're a prominent CEO has accelerated our response. I can't pretend otherwise. Thomas appreciated the honesty, at least. The video of your experience has been viewed over 2 million times in the past 3 hours, Walter continued. Our stock is down significantly. We're facing calls for boycotts. The Department of Transportation has already contacted us about a potential investigation into our boarding practices. I didn't ask for any of that, Thomas pointed out. I know, Walter acknowledged. You just wanted to board your flight like anyone else. The fact that you couldn't do that without facing discrimination is our failure, not yours. Thomas studied the man across from him. Walter Richardson was known as a tough businessman who had cut costs aggressively since taking over the airline. Employee unions had criticized him for reducing training budgets and squeezing more work from fewer staff. What exactly do you want from me, Mr. Richardson? Walter leaned forward. Frankly, we would like this situation resolved as quickly and quietly as possible. We're prepared to offer you significant compensation, a lifetime of top-tier status with our airline, and a formal apology. In exchange for what? A joint statement saying the matter has been resolved to your satisfaction. Perhaps a photo of us shaking hands. Thomas almost laughed. You think this is about free flights and an apology? What is it about then? Walter asked, a hint of frustration breaking through his professional veneer. It's about systems that allow discrimination to happen in the first place, Thomas replied. It's about codes for verification that only seem to apply to certain passengers. It's about the fact that I had to call a board member to be treated with basic dignity. Walter's face flushed slightly. We are committed to addressing those systemic issues. Prove it, Thomas challenged. Don't offer me perks. Offer real change. For the first time in the conversation, Walter seemed genuinely off balance. What exactly are you proposing? Thomas leaned forward. I want a seat at the table, not as a customer who was wronged, but as someone with expertise in systems and company culture. My firm specializes in organizational transformation through technology. We help companies identify and eliminate biases in their automated systems and train their people to make better decisions. Understanding dawned on Walter's face. You want a consulting contract? I want to fix the problem, Thomas corrected. If you're serious about change, let me and my team help you implement it. No special treatment for me. No hushing up the incident. Instead, use this as a catalyst for real transformation. Walter was silent for a long moment, clearly calculating the costs and benefits of Thomas's proposal. The board would need to approve any formal engagement, he said finally. Of course, Thomas agreed, and I have a board meeting tomorrow morning for a major partnership that could double my company's value. I should focus on that first. So what happens now? Walter asked. Thomas stood. Now I go to my hotel and prepare for my meeting. You talk to your board. We both think about what real change looks like, and we meet again when we're ready to discuss specifics, not band-aid solutions. As Thomas gathered his things to leave, Walter remained seated, looking somewhat stunned by the turn of events. He had clearly expected to contain the situation with money and perks, not to receive a challenge for institutional change. One more thing, Thomas said, pausing at the door. Those employees you put on leave? Make sure they get proper training, not just punishment. The problem is bigger than 2 people at a check-in counter. With that, Thomas left the room, feeling the weight of the day on his shoulders, but also a sense of purpose that went beyond his original business trip. Sometimes opportunities for meaningful change came from unexpected places, even from discrimination at an airport check-in counter. The next morning dawned bright and clear in Chicago, but Thomas barely noticed the weather as he prepared for his day. He had spent most of the night reviewing his presentation and fielding calls from concerned board members, all while news of the airport incident continued to spread. Standing before the mirror in his hotel bathroom, Thomas adjusted his tie and took a deep breath. Today was supposed to be about securing the future of Skyward Innovation, a partnership that would allow them to expand into new markets and potentially double their value. Instead, he was also dealing with an unexpected spotlight on discrimination in the airline industry. His phone buzzed on the marble countertop. It was Raymond. Morning, boss. Just checking in before your big meeting. How are you holding up? I'm fine, Thomas replied, though the dark circles under his eyes suggested otherwise. Any updates I should know about? Well, Raymond hesitated. The airline stock dropped 12% by market close yesterday. They've issued a formal statement apologizing for the regrettable incident and announcing a review of their check-in procedures. Thomas shook his head. Generic corporate speak. Anything else? The morning shows all want interviews with you. So far I've declined as you asked. Good. Keep it that way for now. And, Raymond added, Mr. Fitzgerald from the board texted me again. He's worried the airline situation might distract from today's partnership negotiations. Thomas frowned. The two have nothing to do with each other. You know how boards are, Raymond said. They worry about perception. After ending the call, Thomas gathered his materials and headed down to the hotel lobby. A car was waiting to take him to the offices of Global Nexus, the technology conglomerate that was considering a major investment in Skyward Innovation. As the car pulled away from the curb, Thomas noticed a news van parked across the street from the hotel. Word had gotten out about where he was staying. He would need to be more careful about his movements. The car radio was tuned to a morning news program, and Thomas froze when he heard his own name. Chen, CEO of Skyward Innovation, who was allegedly profiled while attempting to board a first-class flight. The incident has sparked renewed conversations about discrimination in the travel industry. National Airways stock continued to fall in after-hours trading, and several major corporate clients are reportedly reviewing their contracts with the airline. The driver glanced in the rearview mirror. "That you they're talking about?" Thomas nodded. "Unfortunately. Man, that video was something else," the driver said, shaking his head. "My wife showed it to me last night. Can't believe they treated you like that." "It happens more often than people realize," Thomas replied quietly. "Well, they're paying for it now," the driver said with a hint of satisfaction. "My buddy works for a travel agency. Says they've had a bunch of businesses calling to switch their corporate accounts to other airlines." Thomas looked out the window, watching the Chicago skyline grow closer. He hadn't intended to cripple the airline financially, but the market had its own way of responding to public relations disasters. When they arrived at the Global Nexus headquarters, a gleaming tower of glass and steel in downtown Chicago, Thomas was escorted directly to the executive floor. The receptionist recognized him immediately, her eyes widening slightly. "Mr. Chen, they're expecting you in the main boardroom," she said. "Can I get you anything before you go in?" "No, thank you," Thomas replied with a polite smile. "I'm ready." The boardroom was impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Lake Michigan, a massive table of polished walnut, and state-of-the-art presentation screens. Around the table sat the key decision-makers who would determine whether Global Nexus would invest in Skyward Innovation. At the head of the table was Anthony Wellington, CEO of Global Nexus and a legend in the tech industry. He rose as Thomas entered. "Thomas, welcome," Anthony said, extending his hand. "We've been looking forward to this presentation." He paused, then added with a slight smile, "Though I must say, you've already given us quite a show before the meeting even started." A nervous chuckle rippled around the table. Thomas shook Anthony's hand firmly. "Not the kind of preview I had planned, I assure you. Please set up your presentation." Anthony gestured to the screen at the front of the room. "But first, I hope you don't mind my asking, how are you handling all the attention?" Thomas could feel every eye in the room on him. This wasn't just curiosity, it was an assessment. How he answered would tell them something about how he handled pressure, public scrutiny, and unexpected challenges, all qualities they would be looking for in a partner. "Honestly," Thomas said, "I'm focusing on what matters most, the future of my company and the people who depend on it. Today isn't about what happened at an airport. It's about what Skyward Innovation and Global Nexus can build together." Anthony nodded approvingly. "Well said. Let's proceed with the presentation." For the next hour, Thomas walked the board through his vision for the partnership, how Skyward's innovative software could integrate with Global Nexus's hardware to create seamless solutions for enterprise clients. He outlined market projections, technical specifications, and financial forecasts with clarity and confidence. Not once did he mention the airline incident, though he could occasionally see board members glancing at their phones, likely reading updates about the situation. When the formal presentation ended, Anthony led the questioning. "Impressive numbers, Thomas. But let me ask about something that's not in your slides. Adaptability. How does Skyward handle unexpected challenges?" Thomas recognized the subtext immediately. "We build flexibility into everything we do," he replied. "When challenges arise, whether technical, market-based, or otherwise, we assess, adapt, and often find opportunities where others see only problems." "And would you say that's how you're approaching your current public relations situation?" asked a board member, a woman with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes. Thomas took a moment before responding. "What happened yesterday was unfortunate, but it's revealed an opportunity to create meaningful change in how companies train their staff and design their systems. In fact, I've already had preliminary discussions about consulting with the airline on improving their practices." Eyebrows raised around the table. "You're turning an incident of discrimination into a business opportunity," another board member asked, sounding slightly incredulous. "I'm turning it into an opportunity for improvement," Thomas corrected. "The business aspect is secondary to fixing a real problem that affects many travelers." Anthony was watching Thomas closely, his expression thoughtful. "That's an interesting approach. taking a negative experience and transforming it into positive change. It's what we do at Skyward every day, Thomas said. Find problems, create solutions. This one just happens to be more personal. After a few more questions, the board called for a short break to discuss privately. Thomas stepped out into the hallway, checking his phone for messages. There were dozens of notifications, news alerts, emails, texts from friends and colleagues who had seen the video. One message caught his eye, an email from Walter Richardson, the airline CEO. Mr. Chen, after careful consideration and discussions with our board, we would like to explore your proposal further. The events of yesterday have made it clear that we need to reevaluate our training and systems. If you're willing, we'd like to discuss a formal consulting arrangement with Skyward Innovation. Please let me know your thoughts. Walter Richardson, CEO, National Airways. Thomas was still contemplating the email when the boardroom door opened and Anthony stepped out. Thomas, we'd like you to come back in, he said with an unreadable expression. Inside, the board members had returned to their seats, looking at Thomas with new interest. Mr. Chen, Anthony began formally, we've been discussing your proposal extensively over the past weeks, and today's presentation has answered our remaining questions. Global Nexus is prepared to move forward with the partnership as outlined, subject to final legal review of the terms. Thomas felt a wave of relief wash over him. Despite everything that had happened, the deal was moving forward. Thank you, he said simply. This partnership will benefit both our companies tremendously. Anthony smiled. I believe it will, and I must say, your handling of yesterday's incident has only reinforced our confidence in your leadership. Many executives would have been completely derailed by such an event right before a major presentation. One of the board members, a younger man with round glasses, leaned forward. Actually, we're quite interested in this consulting approach you mentioned. The airline industry isn't the only sector that struggles with these issues. Indeed, Anthony agreed. We've been looking to improve our own diversity and inclusion practices across Global Nexus. Perhaps that could be an additional area of collaboration between our companies. Thomas hadn't expected this turn in the conversation. I would certainly be open to discussing that possibility. After the meeting concluded with handshakes and promises of next steps, Thomas stepped into the elevator feeling simultaneously exhausted and energized. The partnership he had worked so hard to secure was moving forward. And unexpectedly, the airport incident was opening doors rather than closing them. In the lobby, his phone rang again. It was Diane Powell. Thomas, I've been trying to reach you all morning. How did the meeting go? We got the deal, Thomas said, unable to keep the satisfaction from his voice. That's wonderful news, Diane replied. And what about Walter? Did he contact you? He did. They want to move forward with the consulting arrangement. Diane made a sound of approval. This is turning out rather differently than anyone expected, isn't it? It is, Thomas agreed, stepping out into the bright Chicago day. Sometimes the most meaningful changes come from the most difficult moments. As he walked toward his waiting car, Thomas noticed a small group of reporters gathered on the sidewalk. Someone had tipped them off about his location. Mr. Chen, one called out. Can we get a statement about what happened yesterday? Thomas paused, considering. Until now, he had avoided engaging directly with the media. But perhaps it was time to shape the narrative himself, rather than letting others do it for him. He approached the reporters, who immediately thrust microphones and phones toward him. I'll make a brief statement, he said calmly. What happened yesterday was unfortunately not unusual. Many travelers face similar treatment every day. The difference is that most don't have the platform or resources to demand accountability. I'm working with National Airways to implement real changes in how they train their staff and design their systems. This isn't about one incident or one person. It's about creating fair and respectful experiences for everyone. As the reporters called out follow-up questions, Thomas simply nodded politely and continued to his car. He had said what needed to be said. The rest would be shown through actions, not words. In the car, Thomas finally allowed himself a moment to process everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. What had begun as a routine business trip had turned into something far more significant, a catalyst for change that could potentially impact thousands of travelers. His phone buzzed with a text from Raymond. Just saw you on live TV, boss. I think you might have started something big here. Thomas smiled slightly as he typed his reply. Sometimes that's what it takes. 3 months had passed since that fateful morning at the airport. Thomas sat in his office at Skyward Innovation headquarters, looking out at the city skyline as the afternoon sun cast long shadows between the buildings. On his desk lay the latest quarterly report from National Airways, the first since they had implemented the changes his team had helped design. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," Thomas called. Raymond entered, tablet in hand. "The numbers from National Airways just hit the market," he said without preamble. "Their stock is up 8% today." Thomas nodded, unsurprised. "And customer satisfaction scores? Highest they've been in 5 years, Raymond confirmed, handing over the tablet. Their diversity hiring is up 30% and complaints about discriminatory treatment are down by almost half. Good, Thomas said simply. Real change takes time, but they're moving in the right direction. The partnership between Skyward Innovation and National Airways had evolved far beyond what either company had initially imagined. What began as a response to a crisis had developed into a comprehensive overhaul of the airline's training programs, customer service protocols, and internal reporting systems. The board is thrilled, Raymond added. The consulting division is now generating almost as much revenue as our core software business. Who would have thought that one bad morning at the airport would lead to all this? Thomas smiled slightly. Sometimes the best opportunities come from the worst experiences. His phone buzzed, a text from Diane Powell. Turning on Channel 8. You might want to see this. Thomas reached for the remote and turned on the TV mounted on his office wall. The screen showed a news anchor sitting across from a familiar face. Walter Richardson, CEO of National Airways. Dramatic turnaround for the airline, the anchor was saying. Your stock has recovered all its losses from the incident 3 months ago and is now trading at an all-time high. What do you attribute this success to? Walter, looking more relaxed than Thomas had ever seen him, leaned forward. We made a decision to turn a crisis into an opportunity for real change. When Mr. Chen experienced discrimination at one of our check-in counters, we could have handled it the old way. Issue an apology, offer compensation, and hope the story faded from the news cycle. Instead, we chose to address the root causes. By bringing in Mr. Chen's company as consultants, the anchor prompted. Walter nodded. Skyward Innovation has been instrumental in helping us redesign our systems and training. But I want to be clear, this wasn't just about PR or stopping the financial bleeding. This was about becoming a better company that truly serves all our customers equally. And the employees who were involved in the original incident? The anchor asked. Patricia and Greg were given the option to participate in our enhanced training program, Walter explained. Greg chose to resign, but Patricia completed the program and has since become one of our most vocal internal advocates for change. She's now part of our training team, sharing her experience to help others learn. Thomas turned off the TV, his expression thoughtful. The story had come full circle in ways he hadn't expected. Another knock at the door, this time it was his assistant, Lee. Mr. Chen, your 3 o'clock is here. The student group from Westfield University. Thomas checked his watch. Right on time. Send them in, please. A moment later, the door opened to reveal a group of 12 young people, mostly college age, looking around the executive office with expressions ranging from nervous to awestruck. Welcome to Skyward Innovation, Thomas said, rising from his desk to greet them. I understand you're all part of the business ethics program? A young woman stepped forward, extending her hand. Yes, sir. I'm Tanya Washington, president of the Business Ethics Society. Thank you so much for agreeing to speak with us today. Thomas shook her hand. Please, everyone have a seat. We had to bring in extra chairs, but I think we'll all fit. As the students settled in, Thomas moved to the front of his desk, leaning against it casually rather than sitting behind it. Breaking down barriers, even small ones, had become second nature to him over the past few months. I understand you've been studying the case of what happened with National Airways. Thomas began. What questions do you have for me? Hands shot up around the room. Thomas pointed to a young man near the window. Sir, what was going through your mind when you were first denied boarding? Did you know it would turn into such a big story? Thomas shook his head. Not at all. In that moment, I was just trying to catch my flight like everyone else. I wasn't thinking about viral videos or stock prices or consulting opportunities. I was thinking about being treated with basic dignity and respect. Another student raised her hand. But you did record the interaction. You must have known that might have an impact. I recorded it because documentation matters, Thomas explained. When these incidents happen, and they happen every day to people who don't have my resources or connections, they're often dismissed as misunderstandings or exaggerations. Recording creates an objective record. What about the employees who were involved? Asked another student. Do you think they deserve to lose their jobs? Thomas considered the question carefully. This was never about punishing individuals. Patricia and Greg were operating within a system that allowed, maybe even encouraged, certain kinds of discrimination. The real problem was the system itself. Is that why you decided to work with the airline instead of just suing them? Asked a student in the back row. Exactly, Thomas nodded. Lawsuits might bring financial compensation, but they rarely create meaningful change. I wanted to fix the underlying problems. That's what my company does. We identify system failures and create solutions. The questions continued for nearly an hour, touching on everything from corporate responsibility to personal courage to the role of social media in accountability. Throughout, Thomas answered honestly without corporate jargon or prepared talking points. As the session wound down, Tanya raised her hand one last time. Mr. Chen, many of us will be entering the corporate world soon. What's the most important lesson we should take from your experience? Thomas thought for a moment before answering. Systems don't change unless they're forced to change. Comfortable systems, ones that work well enough for those with power, have no natural incentive to improve. Sometimes it takes a crisis, a disruption, to create the opportunity for real transformation. He paused, looking around at the young faces watching him intently. But here's what I want you all to remember. When you're in positions of influence, and many of you will be, you don't have to wait for a crisis. You can choose to examine your systems proactively, to look for the blind spots and biases and to fix them before they hurt people. That's true leadership. After the students left, Thomas returned to the quarterly report on his desk. The numbers told a compelling story. National Airways had not only recovered from the crisis but was now outperforming its competitors. The new training programs, revised check-in protocols, and bias detection algorithms that Skyward had implemented were showing measurable results. His phone rang. It was Walter Richardson. I just finished the interview, Walter said when Thomas answered. Did you catch any of it? I did, Thomas confirmed. You did well. Thanks to you, Walter replied. The board has approved the expansion of our partnership. They want Skyward to help implement these changes across our international operations as well. I'll have my team draw up a proposal, Thomas said. After ending the call, Thomas walked to the window of his office, looking out at the city below. People moved through the streets going about their lives, unaware of the small changes happening in boardrooms and training sessions that might someday make their experiences a little more fair, a little more respectful. His assistant Lee appeared at the door. The car's here to take you to the airport, Mr. Chen. Thomas smiled at the irony. Another flight? To San Francisco this time, Lee confirmed. For the Diversity in Tech Summit. You're giving the keynote tomorrow morning. Thomas gathered his things, slipping his laptop into his bag. Any special instructions for the airline? He asked with a hint of humor. Lee grinned. No special treatment needed. Though I did hear from my contact at the airport that they've completely revamped their first-class check-in process. Apparently someone important had a bad experience there a few months back. As Thomas headed to the elevator, he reflected on the strange journey of the past 3 months. One moment of discrimination, captured on video and amplified by social media, had triggered a chain reaction that was still unfolding. The airline had changed. His company had changed, and in some ways he had changed too. The elevator doors opened and Thomas stepped inside, nodding to the other passengers. As the doors closed and the elevator began its descent, he noticed one of the passengers looking at him with a flicker of recognition. Excuse me, the man said hesitantly. Aren't you Thomas Chen? The one from that airport video? Thomas nodded. I am. I just wanted to say thank you, the man continued. My wife is a flight attendant for National Airways. She says the new training program has changed everything. How they're treated by management, how they interact with passengers. It's like a different company now, Thomas smiled. I'm glad to hear that. Change is possible when people commit to it. As he walked through the lobby toward the waiting car, Thomas's phone buzzed with an incoming email. It was from a university professor, asking permission to use the National Airways case study in a new textbook on corporate ethics and transformation. Thomas typed a quick reply. Permission granted. Please emphasize that the goal wasn't punishment but progress. Sometimes what looks like a crisis is actually the beginning of something better. He sent the email just as he reached the car. The driver opened the door for him with a smile. Airport, sir? Yes, Thomas confirmed, settling into the back seat. And no need to rush. I have plenty of time before my flight. As the car pulled away from the curb, Thomas watched the city scroll by outside his window. The incident that had gone viral, that had temporarily crippled an airline's stock price and threatened his own important business deal, had ultimately created more positive change than he could have imagined. Sometimes the most powerful call you could make wasn't to a board member or a CEO, but a call for justice that others could hear and answer. And sometimes, what began as a personal humiliation could become a catalyst for transformation that benefited countless others. Thomas smiled to himself as the car merged onto the highway toward the airport. He wasn't dreading this flight at all.